Have you ever, stumbled upon something so baffling, so, resistant to being understood that you almost feel like it's messing with you?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what we're going to be looking at today. Welcome to Forbidden Unveiled.
And welcome to you. Get ready to be just completely captivated by a historical puzzle that has puzzled people for over a century.
I'm your host, John Doe,
A long time.
and with me, as always, is Jane Doe,
Hello there.
our expert in all things paranormal. Think of us as your guides as we explore the unexplained.
We're going to the fringes today. The
Yes.
fringes. Today's fringe is very embroidered. We're talking a mystery that's wrapped in illustrations and sealed with an indecipherable script.
Yeah.
Literally.
We're diving into a truly enigmatic object, the Voynich Manuscript. It's like a medieval what is it?
It is. It's a very beautifully illustrated what is it.
Oh, yeah.
But the artistry itself is part of the puzzle.
Yeah. This is a medieval book, about 240 pages. It's known as a codex, and it's filled with writing. Well, let's just say, if you think your handwriting is bad, this takes it to a whole new level of nobody can read it.
It's true. A completely unknown script despite the efforts of linguists and codebreakers.
Yeah.
For over a century, they've tried everything to unlock its secrets, but it hasn't yielded a single definitive sentence.
And to add to the mystery, the pages are just full of these crazy illustrations.
They are.
We're talking plants that look like they're from another planet, like stars, moons, constellations, and they're populated by naked figures, and then these astrological symbols that don't match up with anything in our known celestial charts.
And each illustration is like, it's whispering a question.
Right.
Like, do you know what I represent? Do you?
Right. Which brings us to, the big question. What in the world is going on here? This manuscript has been, for over a century, like we said, stumping scholars, cryptographers, scientists, everyone. It's like the ultimate locked box of historical secrets.
You know what? That level of mystery is very rare for old documents. Usually something gives way,
Yeah.
but not this one.
So what could this book possibly be? I mean, is it a forgotten language from a civilization that disappeared? Maybe an elaborate hoax dreamed up by a medieval prankster? Maybe it's a recipe book from another dimension? I mean, who knows? But
Yeah.
let's dive in and see what we can find out.
Let's do it. Well, to get a sense of the puzzle, it helps to picture the manuscript.
Okay.
It's about the size of a modern book, so that's pretty standard. But it's made of vellum. Vellum is high-quality parchment. It's made from animal skin.
Okay.
In this case, calf skin.
Okay.
Now, what's really interesting is that radiocarbon dating has firmly placed the creation of this vellum in the early 15th century between 1404 and 1438.
Wow.
So this means that the material itself is definitely from that time. So that rules out any recent forgeries.
Okay, so the pages are legit medieval.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And what's more, the fact that the parchment all dates to this relatively narrow window suggests that it was all prepared specifically for this project. And get this, protein testing has shown that the vellum hadn't been written on before, so it wasn't recycled from another text. Somebody went to a lot of trouble to prepare these pages.
Wow. So this wasn't just someone doodling in their spare time.
Not at all. This was planned.
This is a project.
It was a project, yes. Furthermore, analysis of the ink used for the text and the outlines of the illustrations points to iron gall ink, which was very common at the time. The similarities in the ink suggest that the text and the drawings were likely created around the same period.
Okay, what about the color? What about the paintings themselves?
Yeah, so the colors, it seems that those were added later, and they appear to have been done with a slightly less refined approach. The pigments used were things like azurite for blue, calcium carbonate mixed with egg white for white, ochre for red-brown, and these weren't particularly expensive materials, so while it is colorful, the materials themselves don't necessarily scream like a royal commission or anything.
Gotcha. Okay. So we've got the time frame, the materials, but how is the book organized?
Well, the manuscript seems to be divided into sections based on the illustrations.
Okay.
The largest section, which spans over 100 pages, is what we call the herbal section. Typically, each page will feature one or two drawings of plants and paragraphs of that mysterious text.
You say plants, but would I recognize them if I saw them?
That's a great question, and that's one of the biggest head-scratchers.
Okay.
Despite looking like they should represent the natural world, none of the plants depicted can be definitively matched with any known species from that time or any other. Some researchers have even suggested they look like botanical mashups, as if the roots of one plant were combined with the leaves and flowers of something completely different. This complete lack of correlation defies botanical conventions of the time. Even stylized herbals usually retain some recognizable features. It suggests a purpose beyond simply documenting known flora.
Okay, so botanical illustrations that aren't really botanical.
Right.
That's pretty weird.
It is.
What other sections are there?
Well, following the herbal section is what's called the astronomical section.
Okay.
It's filled with circular diagrams that might remind you of astronomy or astrology charts.
Okay.
These often show depictions of suns, moons, and stars. Notably, one series illustrates the 12 zodiac constellations, but each of these features 30 nude women arranged in concentric circles, each holding a star or tethered to one.
Okay. Naked zodiac women. All right, this is getting stranger.
It is. Then we have what's called the balneological section, which is a dense block of text interspersed with drawings of small, nude women, some even wearing crowns, bathing in pools and tubs that are all connected by an elaborate network of pipes. It almost looks like a fantastical spa retreat layout.
It does sound like an unusual guide to medieval hydrotherapy.
That's one way to put it. Next up is the cosmological section, which features more circular diagrams, but these are even more obscure in their meaning.
Okay.
This section includes some very large fold-out pages, most famously the Rosettes folio, which looks like a complex map or diagram with 9 interconnected, we call them islands or rosettes, containing what appear to be castles and possibly even a volcano.
A medieval fantasy map hidden in a book nobody can read.
Wow.
Okay. The mystery deepens.
It does. After that, we have the pharmaceutical section, which is filled with labeled drawings of isolated plant parts.
Okay.
It kind of looks like it would belong in an old apothecary shop, along with, you guessed it, more of the unreadable text.
Of course.
Finally, there's a section often called recipes, which is just page after page of dense text, with each short paragraph marked by a star in the left margin. What those recipes might be for remains anyone's guess.
Right. So it's a book that covers everything from botany and astronomy to bathing rituals and who knows what else. So what if people thought the purpose of all this could be?
Well, the initial impression, especially given those herbal and pharmaceutical sections, is that it was intended as some kind of pharmacopoeia, a book on medieval medicine.
Makes sense.
However, the bizarre and unidentifiable nature of the illustrations has led to a whole host of other theories.
Okay.
Some have suggested it's an alchemical text, given the strange diagrams and the widespread interest in alchemy during that period.
Makes sense.
The idea of transformation, central to alchemy, certainly resonates with those weird plants and unusual processes depicted.
Alchemy. The quest to turn lead into gold and discover the elixir of life. I mean, that definitely fits the vibe, the unknown, the surreal.
Definitely. Others have proposed astrological or even magical purposes, pointing to that zodiac imagery and the generally esoteric feel of the manuscript. The fact that it was once owned by Emperor Rudolf II, who was well known for his deep interest in the occult, does lend some weight to these ideas.
Rudolf II. There's actually a historical paper trail there, right?
There is, yeah. So the first confirmed owner we know of was a 17th century alchemist from Prague named Georg Beresch. He was so stumped by the manuscript that he actually sent copies of the script to Athanasius Kircher, who was a Jesuit scholar, hoping that he could crack the code.
Yeah.
This 1639 letter from Beresch is the earliest solid record we have of the manuscript's existence.
In Kircher, he was kind of a linguistic genius, right?
Yeah.
And he even claimed to have figured out Egyptian hieroglyphs.
He did, yeah. He was very well known for his linguistic abilities. Whether he actually responded to Beresch, we don't know.
Yeah.
But he definitely seemed to want to acquire the book, which Beresch was unwilling to part with. Later, after Beresch's passing, the manuscript ended up with his friend Jan Marek Marcy, who was the rector of Charles University in Prague, and he sent it to Kircher as a gesture of their friendship.
Interesting. So the book has been on quite a journey.
It really has. Marcy even included a cover letter in 1665 or 1666, which was still attached when Wilfrid Voynich acquired the manuscript centuries later. In this letter, Marcy mentions that a Dr. Raphael, a tutor in Bohemian language, had told him that the book had once belonged to Emperor Rudolf II, and that Rudolf had paid 600 ducats for it, believing the author to be the famous English philosopher and scientist Roger Bacon.
That's a lot of money for a book you can't read.
That is a lot of money, especially back then.
Yeah.
Roger Bacon is a name that comes up often in connection with the manuscript.
Right.
But while the link to Rudolf II seems plausible, historical records do show he purchased many rare books around that time. But the Bacon theory has largely been dismissed by scholars because of the dating of the manuscript.
Right.
It doesn't really line up. So from Rudolf II, we know that it somehow made it to the hands of this alchemist Baresh, but the timeline has this gap of about 200 years.
Yeah.
So it's not entirely clear how it got there.
It's a mystery.
It's a bit of a mystery, yeah. It's generally believed that after Kircher's death, the manuscript remained with his other papers in the library of the Collegio Romano. It likely stayed there until Italy annexed the Papal States in 1870, leading to the confiscation of church properties.
Okay.
However, some books, including Kircher's correspondence, were moved to the private libraries of the faculty, and they escaped confiscation.
Wow.
The Voynich Manuscript seems to have been among these, as it later bore the bookplate of Petrus Bex, who was the head of the Jesuit order at that time.
Okay, so it was hiding in plain sight in a Jesuit library for a couple of centuries.
It was. Then, in the early 20th century, the Society of Jesus decided to sell some of their holdings. And in 1912, a Polish book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich acquired 30 of these manuscripts, including the one that would become famous under his name.
Right. And that's how the Voynich Manuscript entered the modern world.
It is. He then spent years trying to get scholars to decipher it. After his death, it passed through his widow, Ethel Voynich, who, interestingly, was the author of The Gadfly.
Wow.
And eventually, in 1969, it was donated to Yale University's Benecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library,
Okay.
where it remains today.
Baffling everyone.
Baffling everyone. It's been scrutinized by some of the best minds in cryptography, linguistics, even AI.
So what are some of the ideas about the script itself? I mean, is it some sort of complex code? Is it a natural language that we just don't recognize? Or is it something else entirely?
Well, the possibilities are numerous. The letter-based cipher theory was the initial approach.
Right.
The idea that this unknown script is simply a substitution for a known European language using some kind of mapping system.
Okay.
But the statistical properties of the Voynich text don't really align with any known language or typical cipher from that era.
Okay, so a simple letter-for-letter swap isn't the answer. What about more complex codes?
Some have suggested more complex ciphers,
Okay.
where single letters in an original text are encoded into groups of Voynich characters.
Okay.
The fact that certain combinations appear repeatedly has led some to explore this. Others have proposed it could be some form of shorthand for a known language like Latin, but those attempts have been met with skepticism.
What about steganography? Like, maybe the actual message is hidden in some way that's not immediately obvious.
Yeah, the information could be concealed,
Right.
like maybe in the second letter of every word or the length of the lines.
Right.
This is a very old trick, but proving or disproving it is incredibly difficult.
Right.
The potential hiding places are virtually endless.
What if it's an actual language that's just completely unknown to us?
Well, that is a compelling theory to some.
Yeah.
Statistical analysis of the structure and the character usage have led some to believe that it does exhibit properties similar to natural language, rather than just random nonsense. There have even been attempts to link it to language families like Germanic or Turkic languages, with a few claiming to have achieved partial translations.
There have been some recent claims about people figuring it out.
There have been over the years.
Yeah.
There have been numerous people who have come forward, often with much fanfare, saying they've cracked the code. For example, in the early 20th century, William Newbold put forward an elaborate theory.
Yeah.
He claimed it was microscopic Greek shorthand embedded within the visible script. He even claimed it proved Roger Bacon had invented the microscope centuries earlier, but his methods were later debunked.
Yeah.
Thoroughly debunked.
So maybe take those claims with a grain of salt.
Absolutely. More recently, computer scientists have used sophisticated machine learning algorithms, suggesting connections to languages like Hebrew and Turkish. And of course, there was the researcher who claimed it was a Proto-Romance language, identifying medicinal plants and linking it to a Queen of Aragon.
But these pronouncements have not been widely accepted, have they?
No, they have not.
Yeah.
Not really.
Right.
A lot of these so-called decipherments have been criticized for using flawed methodologies and ultimately producing translations that just don't make sense. So the mystery continues.
So could it be a constructed language, like something that's entirely made up?
That's a possibility.
Yeah.
The unusual structure of the words has led some to speculate it could be a synthetic universal language, although known examples from that period tend to be quite different. The repetitive nature of the text might fit with a language that uses prefixes and suffixes to carry meaning,
Yeah.
but nobody has convincingly identified any such consistent system.
What about a hoax?
Well, it's a theory that can't be ruled out.
Right.
The computer scientist Gordon Rugg famously demonstrated how pseudotext that looks a lot like the Voynich manuscript could be generated using some surprisingly simple techniques involving tables and a perforated paper overlay. So the vellum and pigments might be old, but the content could be meaningless, like an elaborate medieval joke.
I mean, it would have taken a lot of effort to create such a hoax.
It would have taken a lot of time and resources.
Yeah.
However, some argue that the cost, while not insignificant, may not have been prohibitive to certain wealthy individuals.
Right.
They could have been trying to con a wealthy collector.
Yeah.
Maybe even someone like Rudolph II, who we know paid a lot for strange items.
Right.
Maybe it was a way to, mess with future generations, like a medieval internet troll.
I love it. That's great.
But in book form.
But in book form. Yeah. That's a great thought.
Finally, there's the idea that the manuscript could be a case of glossolalia or speaking in tongues, perhaps linked to a trance-like state or even mental illness. The repetitive imagery and the seemingly nonsensical text could potentially align with such a phenomenon, though it's certainly a less conventional explanation.
Yeah. So it's a captivating mystery, hundreds of pages of unreadable script.
It really is.
Alongside bizarre drawings that continue to defy explanation.
That's the truth. And despite the lack of answers, the Voynich manuscript continues to fascinate.
Oh, yeah.
It sparks curiosity and inspires speculation. It's become a cultural touchstone for the unexplained.
As we wrap up our deep dive into the Voynich manuscript, we find ourselves with more questions than answers.
As always.
And that seems to be the nature of mysteries.
It is. We've looked at its origins in the 15th century, that unknown script and those peculiar illustrations.
Yeah.
The numerous theories surrounding its purpose, from herbs to alchemy, astrology, to an elaborate hoax, to a constructed language, to even something psychological.
Right.
And of course, all the failed attempts to decipher it.
Right. It's a testament to the power of a good puzzle.
It is.
One that's been around for centuries.
A good puzzle is hard to resist.
Yeah.
In a way, the act of trying to decipher the Voynich manuscript, regardless of whether we ever succeed, might be revealing something profound.
Oh, interesting.
Could it be showing us something about human curiosity, our need for knowledge, or even the limits of our understanding? Maybe the journey is more important than the destination in this particular mystery.
That's a great thought. Yeah. Maybe the real value isn't in cracking the code, but in what we learn about ourselves and trying to.
Exactly.
Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. Jane, thanks for guiding us through this medieval enigma.
My pleasure. It's always a pleasure to go on these journeys with you.
And thanks for joining us on Forbidden Unveiled, everyone. If you enjoyed this, be sure to follow or subscribe to Forbidden Unveiled wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back with more explorations into the strange and intriguing corners of our world.
See you next time.
And a special thank you to all of you, our listeners.
Yes, thank you.
Until next time, keep those curious minds engaged.